In 2020, an Irish court made a strange ruling. Subway sandwich bread, when tested for tax classification, contained so much sugar that it could not be legally classified as bread under Irish law. The court ruled it should be classified as a confectionery product, a candy, a cake. A global sandwich chain selling cake to millions of people who thought they were eating bread. This was not a glitch or a strange interpretation. American-style bread, including the bread used by major sandwich chains, contains sugar levels that other countries genuinely do not recognize as bread. In Ireland, the legal definition of bread caps the sugar content at 2% of the flour weight. The Subway bread tested at over 10%. 5 times the legal limit. That ruling went viral for a few weeks and then disappeared from the news. But the question it raised never got answered. If American bread is technically cake by European standards, what exactly is sitting in your kitchen right now? Here is the truth about American bread that the food industry has spent decades hoping you would not look into. Your bread is sweeter than your grandparents could have imagined. It contains ingredients they would not have recognized as food. It lasts longer than any naturally made bread possibly could. And the reasons all trace back to industrial decisions made between the 1950s and the 1970s that fundamentally rewrote what bread is in this country. Real bread, for almost all of human history, contained 4 ingredients: flour, water, salt, yeast. That is it. 4 ingredients. Mixed, kneaded, fermented, baked. A loaf that lasted maybe 2 to 3 days before going stale. A loaf that you bought from a bakery every other day. A loaf that European countries still legally protect as the only thing allowed to be called bread. Walk into a typical American supermarket bread aisle and look at the ingredient list of a standard sliced loaf. You will find enriched wheat flour, water, sugar or high fructose corn syrup, vegetable oil, yeast, salt, mono and diglycerides, calcium propionate, sodium stearoyl lactylate, dough conditioners, soybean lecithin, calcium sulfate, ammonium sulfate, and a list of preservatives that extends to 20 or 30 ingredients. That is not bread. That is bread-shaped industrial product. Here is what happened in American bread between 1950 and today. In the 1950s, large industrial bakeries replaced most local bakeries. The economics required loaves that could survive long supply chains, weeks on supermarket shelves, and transportation across the country. Traditional bread cannot do any of those things. The industry responded with a series of additions. High fructose corn syrup was added for sweetness and shelf life. The cheap corn-derived sweetener became standard in American bread in the 1980s. Most European bread contains no HFCS at all. Dough conditioners were added to make industrial mixers work faster and more reliably. These chemical additives speed up gluten formation and let dough be processed mechanically at scale. European bread traditionally uses long natural fermentation. American industrial bread can be ready for the oven in under an hour. Mono and diglycerides were added to soften the texture and extend shelf life. They are emulsifiers derived from oils and fats that prevent bread from going stale quickly. They also make industrial bread feel uniformly soft and fluffy in a way that real bread cannot replicate. Calcium propionate was added as a mold inhibitor. This is why American bread lasts 2 weeks in your pantry without growing mold. Real bread grows mold in 3 to 5 days because nothing is stopping it. Each one of these additions, individually, was approved by the FDA. Each one, individually, is generally considered safe. The problem is that when you stack them all together, you no longer have bread. You have a product that looks like bread, slices like bread, fits in a toaster like bread, and tastes vaguely like sweetened bread, but is fundamentally a different category of food. European bread laws specifically prevent this stacking. In Germany, bread classification is regulated by the Deutsches Lebensmittelbuch, which defines exactly what can and cannot be called Brot. Maximum sugar limits. Maximum additive limits. Minimum fermentation times. There are over 3,000 legally recognized types of bread in Germany, all of them required to follow these traditional standards. France enforces similar rules through the 1993 Bread Decree, which defines pain de tradition française as containing only flour, water, salt, and yeast or sourdough, with no additives whatsoever. Any bread labeled with this term must follow that recipe by law. In Ireland, as the Subway case proved, sugar content above 2% of flour weight legally disqualifies a product from being called bread. American food law has no such restrictions. There is no federal limit on how much sugar bread can contain, how many additives can be included, or how long the fermentation has to last. Anything baked from flour can be called bread in the United States, regardless of what else is in it. This is also why traditional European bread does not last more than a few days, but American bread lasts weeks. Real bread is supposed to go stale quickly. It is a sign that the ingredients are real. When American bread sits on a shelf for 2 weeks without changing texture or growing mold, that is not a sign of quality. It is a sign that you are eating preservatives. Here is the most surprising part of this story. American consumers do not actually prefer the taste of industrial bread. Multiple blind taste tests have shown that when offered traditional European-style bread alongside standard American sliced bread, most participants chose the traditional version as tasting better. The reason American supermarkets sell so much industrial bread is not preference. It is convenience and supply chain economics. Industrial bread is cheap to produce, lasts long enough to ship anywhere, and can be sold by retailers who do not have to deal with daily fresh bakery deliveries. A growing number of American consumers have noticed. The artisan bread movement, sourdough renaissance, and traditional bakery revival of the last decade are all responses to this slow realization that what most Americans buy as bread is not actually bread by any historical standard. Compare 2 slices for a moment. A slice of traditional French baguette contains wheat flour, water, salt, yeast. It will be stale by tomorrow morning. It will mold by Thursday. It costs about $1.50 for a fresh loaf at any neighborhood bakery in Paris. A slice of standard American sandwich bread contains over 20 ingredients. It will look exactly the same on the shelf 2 weeks from today. It will not grow mold for another week beyond that. It costs about $4 at most supermarkets. Same word, same shape, same intended purpose. 2 completely different products with 2 completely different relationships with time and ingredients. One is a food that exists at the speed of nature. The other is a manufactured product designed to win supply chain logistics. The bread sitting in your kitchen right now is not what your grandmother grew up with. It is not what most of Europe still eats today. It is the result of 70 years of industrial decisions stacked on top of a word that used to mean something specific. Read that backwards. American bread is not worse bread. It is something else, marketed as bread, that gradually replaced the original. Every loaf of standard American sliced bread is a product of decisions made by an industry that needed shelf life, transportation tolerance, and uniform texture across the entire continent. None of those goals require what bread is supposed to be. Now you know. What does the ingredient list on your favorite bread look like? Drop it in the comments. I want to see how this varies across this channel. If you learned something today, share this with someone who deserves to know what is actually in their breakfast.